Picture this. You're scrolling through listings online. 3-bedroom house, decent neighborhood, reasonable commute. The price seems high, but everyone around you keeps saying the same thing. Real estate always goes up. Your parents did it, your coworkers did it, and now you're wondering if the window's closing and you're the only one being left behind. So you make an offer, you stretch your budget just a little. You tell yourself it's an investment. What if I told you that right now, millions of people are walking into the exact same financial trap? And the truly dangerous part isn't the price tag. It's what they don't see coming until it's already too late. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will completely change how you look at the housing market. Let's start with a number that should stop you cold. The average American home price today is hovering near $420,000. Back in 2019, that same home cost roughly $250,000. That's a 68% increase in under 6 years. Now ask yourself, did your income go up 68% in that same period? For most people, the answer is a hard no. This is what economists are calling the affordability gap, and it's widening faster than most buyers realize. Wages have grown somewhere between 20 and 25% over that same period. Prices have nearly tripled that pace. So on paper, you're buying a house. In reality, you're paying for a gap between what the market demands and what working people can actually earn. But here's the part that gets buried in the excitement of buying a home. It's not just the price, it's the monthly payment. And the monthly payment has quietly become the most dangerous number in this entire conversation. In 2021, if you bought a $300,000 home with a 30-year fixed mortgage at 3%, your monthly payment was roughly $1,205. Today, with rates near 7%, that same $300,000 home costs you around $1,196 per month. That's an extra $731 every single month. Over the life of the loan, you're paying nearly $263,000 more in interest alone. You read that right. $250,000 extra. Not for a bigger house, not for a better neighborhood, just because of the interest rate environment you happen to buy in. That's payment shock. And most first-time buyers don't run those numbers until it's already done. Now here's where it gets interesting and a little bit uncomfortable. If rates are this high, why aren't prices falling? Why isn't the market correcting? You'd expect affordability to drop, demand to shrink, prices to ease. That's how economics is supposed to work. But the housing market isn't behaving like a normal market right now. And there's a specific reason why. It's called the interest rate lock-in effect. Between 2020 and 2021, mortgage rates hit historic lows, some dropping below 3%. Millions of homeowners locked in those rates. And now, they're not moving. Why would they? If you're sitting on a 2.9% mortgage and the market rate today is 7%, selling your home means giving up that rate forever. It means stepping into the same brutal payment environment that everyone else is suffering through. According to data from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, more than 60% of outstanding U.S. mortgages carry rates below 4%. These homeowners are effectively frozen in place. They want to move, maybe for a new job, a growing family, a change in life. But the financial penalty is just too severe. So inventory stays low. Buyers keep competing for fewer and fewer homes. And prices stay elevated even as affordability crumbles underneath them. The market isn't being held up by demand right now. It's being held up by inertia. And inertia eventually breaks. But wait, because the story gets a layer deeper. And this is the part most mainstream financial media won't spend much time on. You might assume that the homes you're competing for are being bought by families just like yours. People who need a place to live, raise kids, build a life. And some of them are. But a significant and growing portion of residential real estate has been absorbed by a completely different kind of buyer: institutional investors, private equity firms, short-term rental operators turning the neighborhoods into de facto hotels. According to data from MetLife Investment Management, institutional investors could own up to 40% of single-family rental homes in the United States by 2030. In some Sunbelt cities, Atlanta, Phoenix, Charlotte, these entities were purchasing a staggering share of available homes during the pandemic-era market surge. These buyers don't operate the way you do. They're not running affordability calculations based on salary. They're running yield models based on rental income, tax advantages, and asset appreciation projections. They can outbid you not because they're smarter, but because they're playing a completely different financial game with access to capital you simply don't have. What this does to a neighborhood is quiet and devastating. Homes that would have been entry-level starter homes for young families become rental units. The first rung of the ladder gets pulled up. And the people who grew up believing that home ownership was the path to building wealth find themselves perpetually locked out of the market, paying rent to the very entities that outbid them. This isn't a conspiracy, it's just incentive structures playing out at scale. But understanding it changes how you should think about what you're buying into. Let's talk about something nobody wants to say out loud at an open house. There's a recession risk sitting quietly at the edge of this entire conversation. And the combination of factors in play right now makes it more serious than most buyers are factoring into their decisions. Here's the scenario that keeps economists up at night. A buyer stretches to purchase a home at today's elevated prices, finances it at a 7% rate, commits to a monthly payment that takes up 40, 45, even 50% of their take-home income. And they do it because everyone says real estate always goes up, because renting feels like throwing money away, because they're afraid of being priced out forever. And then the economy slows down. Companies start cutting. Layoffs hit industries that felt untouchable just a year ago. Tech, finance, healthcare administration. The buyer loses their job or takes a significant pay cut to stay employed. Now they're holding a mortgage they could barely afford at full salary, with savings already depleted by a down payment that stretched their limits, with no equity cushion because they bought at peak prices with minimal down, and with a market that, in a recessionary environment, may not provide an easy exit. This is called being over-leveraged, and it's not a fringe scenario. This is how housing corrections become financial crises, not because the house was a bad house, but because the timing, the leverage, and the economic cycle aligned in the worst possible way. The families who got hurt worst in 2008 weren't reckless gamblers, for the most part. They were people who believed the same thing most buyers believe today, that the market would hold, that their job was secure, that real estate always goes up. Which brings us to the biggest psychological trap in this entire story, the belief that real estate all will appreciates. It's treated as almost a law of nature, something your parents told you, something your agent reconfirms every time you hesitate, something the broader culture has absorbed so completely that questioning it feels almost irrational. But the historical record tells a more complicated story. Japan's real estate market peaked in 1991. It didn't recover to those levels for over 30 years. 30 years. A generation of buyers who purchased near the peak spent the bulk of their working lives holding an asset worth less than what they paid for it. The United States housing market peaked in 2006. By 2012, national home values had fallen by roughly 33%, according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Index. Millions of households were underwater, meaning they owed more on their mortgage than their home was actually worth. Appreciation is real over long enough time horizons, but it is not guaranteed in the short term or even the medium term. A buyer who purchases today and needs to sell in 5 to 7 years due to a job change, a divorce, a financial emergency, may find themselves in a market that hasn't recovered what they paid. And because of closing costs, agent commissions, and the front-loaded nature of mortgage interest, you can easily lose money on a home you held for several years if the market turns against you at the wrong moment. Real estate is not a liquid asset. You cannot sell 10% of your house when you need cash. You cannot exit the position in a day. You're locked in. And when the market moves against you, that lock works against you completely. So, where does that leave you? What's the actual takeaway from all of this? This isn't an argument for never buying a home. Home ownership, done right, at the right time, with the right financial foundation, can be one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to a middle-class family. That's still true. But right now, in this specific market, at this specific moment in the economic cycle, there are forces at work that make the decision far more complicated than the culture around you is acknowledging. Prices have outpaced wages by a margin that should give any careful buyer pause. Payment shock is real, and it's being normalized in ways that should concern you. A supply shortage built on artificial inertia is masking demand that may not be as strong as prices suggest. Institutional money has changed the character of the market in ways that disadvantage individual buyers. And the macroeconomic environment carries a risk that over-leveraged buyers are not adequately pricing in. Before you make the biggest financial decision of your life, ask yourself 3 questions. Could you sustain your mortgage payment if your income dropped by 30% for a year? Do you have enough liquid savings, separate from your down payment, to handle both job loss and home repairs simultaneously? And are you buying because the numbers genuinely work, or because the cultural pressure to own feels stronger than the financial logic to wait? Those 3 questions will tell you more than any real estate agent, any market forecast, or any headline ever will. The trap isn't the house. The trap is the story we've all been told about what the house means, and buying into that story without ever checking whether the math supports it in this moment, in this market, under these conditions. The people who come out ahead in difficult markets aren't the ones who moved fastest. They're the ones who looked hardest at what everyone else was too excited to examine. If this gave you a new lens on what you thought you already understood, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly that purpose. To pull back what's comfortable and look clearly at what's real. Leave a comment below and tell me where you are in this process. Are you thinking about buying, already in, or deliberately waiting it out? I read every single one. The question isn't whether the housing market will eventually be right for you. The question is whether you'll make that decision with your eyes fully open, or whether you'll look back 5 years from now and realize the trap was right there in plain sight the whole time.